Hey everyone, welcome back. We're so glad to have you. And today we have a special guest who is a new friend and connection for us. And she is going to talk to us about her passion and the invitation that she gives to people to have a life that is more slow down, which for us, this is one of our pillars of healing. Flourish Therapy's 5 pillars of healing. Slowing down is the 4th pillar. And when we saw her work, we were just excited that there's other people that really see the value in this and help usher other people into this beautiful way of living. So we're going to introduce Jodi to you. Jodi Grubbs, she is a slow living advocate and lover of deep conversations over coffee, which we are across the world today. We're not having coffee together, but it's kind of like that. She lives outside Raleigh, North Carolina, and she shares a 1952 bungalow with her husband and her teenage daughter. She's a former island girl, and she's passionate about coming alongside women who long for that shift into slower living. She's a writer and a host of her own podcast, Our Island in the City. She loves having conversations with her guests about slowing down, faith, ordinary soul care, and deep community. She has a book that's coming out with IV Press, InterVarsity Press, in 2024 that she's currently working on. And we're so glad to have her here with us today. So welcome, Jodi.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Luke. I'm so glad to be here on your podcast today.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Just as Lauren was just reading that biography, it was just something popped out at me. It was like working alongside women who long to shift. I think that's so important because women are just expected to be kind of like superhuman and they don't need to slow down. They can juggle everything and take care of everybody and do everything. And they should be able to do that. And if they can't, then there's something wrong with them. There's that expectation. So I love the intentionality of helping women slow down. Mm-hmm. Loving women in that specific, special, unique way, to invite them to sit in who they are. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And I just wanted to share that's so cool.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you. Yeah, my heart is just for primarily women to see that. So I feel like I can give women permission to slow down and the invitation to stay there. And then through working with them, they sort of have that aha moment. Oh, I didn't really need permission in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. That's powerful.
It's
like a pseudo permission. Like, I'm giving you permission here, but you're going to soon find out that you've had it all along. That's
absolutely
so powerful. Well, we appreciate your graciousness with us today because we had a morning of where we did not embody this
slowing
way
down.
of living so well. We thought we got our time wrong. I had told Jodi a certain time. I had written it online for us, but then in my phone, I put the wrong time. So Luke was just following off of the time I put in the phone, but it's totally my fault. So we were late and Jodi was just like, it's all right. We'll be fine. We'll jump on later. So
I was just pretending we were on island time, Lauren.
Exactly. and really it is Thailand time too. We call it Thai time. It's like, let's meet at 8:30, 8:45, whenever.
Right. I always joke with people when they say, well, what was your childhood like? And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'll just throw this out as a little nugget. So my mom would drop me off at a birthday party if the invite said, 2 to 4 or say 4 to 6. And my mom was very punctual. And so I would get there at 3:59 and I'd be the only child there for a good hour.
Oh,
and
wow.
Oh, no.
Pick me up. I didn't want to go because the party was just getting underway.
That's a great example. Oh, cultural differences with time, so significant.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Well, we'd love to hear more about your story. We'd love to spend this beginning part of the podcast just getting to know you more, letting our listeners get to know your story more. So, yeah, we just welcome you to open on up.
Okay, well, thank you. My story, it's all I know, right? It's my life, but it does come across a little more unique because I've lived in two different cultures. And so when you live in a different culture, you don't know any different. So I was born on the island of Bonaire. It's in the West Indies, which is the southern part of the Caribbean. So we were an island called Bonaire next to Aruba. It's about 80 miles north of Caracas, Venezuela. So just to give you an idea of where it is, 80 degrees every day, trade winds, little bit of a desert island, not as lush maybe as Aruba. Very, very small. 13,000 people live there, 24/7. And yeah, I lived there for 16 years. So my parents put me in a Dutch school when I was 4 on the island. The island was owned by Queen Beatrix of Holland. And so my classmates and I learned Dutch, but at home I spoke English. My parents are American. And then playing with the children and all my friends in the afternoons, they spoke an island dialect called Papiamento, which is a combination of English, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, and Afrikaans. And so as a child, yes, one of my mother's friends actually came up with the first dictionary for these islands. So we would just stand around as kids and all throw in different languages until we understood each other. And, within a year or two, we were all speaking all 3 languages. So I don't remember a lot as an adult. As you can tell, I have a Southern accent. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And yeah, but I do remember some of the language. And so anyway, I had just a really quiet childhood. You can imagine just having a backyard that you walk out and you see the reef in the Caribbean. So you can see down 60 feet. It's pristine. Comes in second place to Australia for scuba diving. It's just the most beautiful island and people. And we moved to the United States when I was 16 to New Jersey. So it was a little bit of a culture shock for me.
A little colder too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
I had already experienced snow though, because my relatives thought it was pretty funny. When I was about 7, I saw snow for the first time on a vacation to the US, and I ran out there barefoot. And they're like, "Oh, what is she doing?" And my parents are like, "It's okay. She goes barefoot out. She'll figure it out." And then I came running right back in. So yes. But all that to say, I had a very just a beautiful childhood, just with international friends and just a beautiful experience on the island. So and a lot of that shifted. I came to the US and I finished up school here and went to college, and I moved to Atlanta, and I fell in love. I got married to a Southern boy, and he was in a really bad accident. So he ended up, he and his father were driving a work truck and came around a big corner on I-85 in Atlanta. And if you know anything about that part of the US, you have to keep going really, really fast on the highway. And they came around a really big bend, and there was some road rage going on that they, of course, couldn't see coming up ahead. And so Brian was his name. He and his dad went under a semi truck that was in the way, trying to get after some people, and some not nice things were done. And so his dad had a broken nose, but Brian was crushed under the semi truck. And so he should have passed away, and he didn't. He lived for 2.5 years, and he was in a hospital for 9 months. So our lives really came to an end, about almost $2 million in medical expenses, 33 surgeries. And not anything I would wish on anybody ever, just the pain he went through. 4 months were in a shock trauma ICU. So our lives slowed down significantly. And yeah, everything stopped. And so he made a full, I would say 99% recovery. And then he passed away one morning from complications from something from a previous one of his 33 surgeries. And so he died with me just in about a minute. So yeah, it's sort of starting out a beautiful childhood, and some people go through a very difficult childhood and sort of emerge as an adult, and mine's flipped a little bit.
Yeah.
So I know that's a quick synopsis of my life, but
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
It's hard to shift after that, but I just want to respect it, that story. So thank you for sharing it. And that's like a layered tragedy of the accident and then getting better, and then all of a sudden that quick loss. I can, again, as you mentioned, as you're talking about your childhood, I just feel like this peace going over me, like, oh my gosh, I just feel like slowing down and resting. And so I hear that foundation of slowing down, and then like a different invitation than was given to you of, you have to slow down. It's not just nice and part of your life, it's, you have to. And I think it's interesting that I think that that's how we get invited to slowing down. It's either a gentle invitation to it, or a abrupt invitation to it. And I see why you're passionate about slowing down, because you can relate to both invitations.
Absolutely. The hardest one is when slowing down is chosen for us.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's easy to say, I'm going to take a month, I'm going to be on sabbatical, or I'm going to jump into the slow living lifestyle. But it's very hard when it's chosen for you, whether it's an illness or, you know, a job loss, or really anything you can imagine. So
yeah, you know, this wasn't I hadn't planned on asking this question, but if you're okay with exploring it for a minute, we just work with a lot of people who have gone through really hard grief, and you know, in that place, people, it's just so normal to imagine never being able to recover from something so catastrophic. And I'm just thinking of your story and how you must have helped to nurse back your husband to life, and how incredibly hard that must have been. And then after all of that, for him to pass, and I imagine you hit a pretty low place. And I'm just curious, how, like, did you think you were ever going to be able to take hold of life again? I would just love to hear what that looked like for you.
Sure, Lauren. So someone was asking me this the other day, and I said, you know, when someone passes, we are more in shock in the beginning, right? But for me, this was like a double tragedy. So honestly, the time from his accident until right before he passed, those were the hardest times. So he had almost died 4 times during that time. And I think I had almost been prepared. Not that either of us knew he was going to pass, but I had been through so much trauma that when he did pass, it would be it wasn't the same feeling as if he had passed the day of the accident. So it was extremely hard, because we were just starting a brand new life, basically. But the hard part, which I had to actually go to therapy for later, was the trauma that we both went through. And I had a lot of PTSD from when you watch a loved one go through and there's nothing that you can do.
Absolutely.
You know, I became an advocate for him in the hospital, and his thankfully my mother-in-law was a nurse, and so she was really able to speak up. Not at that hospital, she's a nurse at a different hospital, but she was really with us. And so when I call myself a slow living advocate, part of it is, yes, I want to come alongside of women and say, you can slow down if you want to, I'll walk with you. But I also just have the advocate in the back of my mind for having to stand up for him, and a lot of what he needed. So all that to say, I don't know if I answered your question, Lauren, but I had a friend say to me, oh, I just, you're just so strong. If this had happened to me, I would just die. I'm like, we don't sometimes get that luxury of just, we are left and we are living and we have to keep living. And I wanted to say, no, you won't die. You might want to sometimes, but you won't. You'll find your way again. And so I think all of us are helping each other find our way again. We're walking each other home, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It sounds like you were a sense of grieving the loss of him for what would you say, like 2.5 years?
Yes, he lived for 2.5 years after that accident.
So there was a lots of grieving, like, oh, I'm going to lose him. Oh, I might lose him. Oh, and so there's that. So it wasn't, like you said, that if the day that it happened, if he died, that would have been a shock. But 2.5 years of medical trauma and all of that process.
Right.
You were in the midst of that grief that whole time. And
or at least he being so familiar with the depths of grief, going down and then up and then down to the depths so many times. We can at least imagine what you're saying, how the double grief, the double tragedy had a different feel than if it was that one day. It's just, how our journeys play out bring the complex layers to our story and to our traumas. And you had gained so many more traumas because he was a fighter, ironically.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. He, and this is right before I met him. I didn't ever get to see this play out, but he was the 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo in Atlanta.
Wow.
So, when that happens, someone is not just physically strong, they're mentally strong.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people said, I don't think most people would have lived through what he did. So you couple in his faith in God, which is actually a very new faith for him, and then his physical strength, and then the mental strength. So
wow. Yeah, that's a fascinating perspective of bringing those three together. Wow.
And we had lots of community, I have to say. Maybe to finish answering your question, Lauren, what got me through is my faith in God, but I didn't even know sometimes what to think or feel, right? Pat answers were not going to help me. And so I had to just walk through it. And so I will say the people that got put in my path, the community, and it changed over time. When he died, I needed to just move away. So I came back to Raleigh, to where my family had settled, and that's where I met Dean, my husband that I have been married to for 21 years.
Wow.
Well, we would love to hear kind of the second half of your story of those years of restoration and healing, and kind of the second part, and how you became, how you started doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always had to move at a little bit slower pace than people. I've always struggled with belonging. Where do I belong in the world? You
Yeah.
know, who am I? I don't think you just have to be necessarily a third culture kid or person, you know, to experience that.
But it does complicate things a little bit.
It does, right. So every once in a while I'll tell my husband Dean, like, I'm homesick, you know, for the island, because those
Yep.
were my formative years, right? And um so I think one day our daughter was, I don't know, she was 3 or 4, and I found myself in this season of being a young mom, or a mom with a young child, and just trying to do everything, you know, like running the roads, like going to, you know, field trips and play dates and everything you can imagine. And I couldn't keep up. My body started getting sick. And so for 3 or 4 autumns in a row, I would get bronchitis, strep pneumonia, just get really, really sick. And
Yeah.
my doctor told my husband one time, I almost admitted her to the hospital. She was so sick. And so one day she sat down with me and she said, you know, you can get a pneumonia shot that'll last you 8 years. She's like, but you have to slow down, and you're volunteering too much. You're doing too much. That's the problem. And I thought, oh, like I should know this. And in my book, I talk about that. Yes, I will guide you, but part of it's like, don't do what I did. I should have even known better. I had this whole framework and foundation for slow living, and I got caught up a little bit in the culture here and what I thought everyone was doing and keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. So that's when I had to completely shift and say, okay, I've got to go back to this island mindset, you know, slowing down, taking more time, being fully present where I'm at, whether it's with my daughter or with a friend, an activity, just being fully there. And then also building community again. So just going back to some of I call it more soul care than self-care. You know, I always think a lot of people just, they don't want another glass of wine and a bubble bath. Like they're like, I can do that. But
Right.
what I really want is to slow down enough to live the way I really want to live, and not the way I think everyone is expecting me to live. So I had to shift that myself so that I could be there for my daughter, and different activities that we had, and just the life that I wanted with my husband and daughter. So in a nutshell, yeah, that was the shift where I started talking to other women, and just found myself encouraging them. Oh, you don't have to do this. Like, no one's saying you have to move this fast, you know? So in my book, I sort of help us deconstruct some of the lies we've believed, about having to go fast. You know, I believe it's in China right now. There's a phrase called lying flat, and it refers to slow living. So many of the youth there are sort of rebelling against this whole, you know, hardcore schooling and work. And they're saying, we can't do this. It's killing us. And so it's not just in the Caribbean or a little bit of the US, certain pockets. It's a lot of people are realizing I have a very full, deep life that I'm not living because I'm not slowing down to make that happen.
Yeah.
Totally.
In one of our teachings, we talk about, there's also a Japanese word that says, it means death from overworking.
Oh,
And so it became a phenomenon that they were working themselves to death. And they came up with a word, it's like, this is what is going on here. And so, like, you're right, it can be a human problem of overworking to perform, to find identity, to purpose. I had to mute myself because as you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like 6 notes I have to write down, and my brain's not going to hold them all.
right.
I already lost one before I got to writing the note. But I was just thinking as you were talking, I'm like, man, I can't wait for your book to come out. I could just listen to you tell stories like all day. I'm just like, I was like, this is just listen to you talk about life and your life and explaining life. And I'm just like, I'm gonna write. I need to get your book. You need to hurry up and get that. IVP needs to hurry up and get your book published because
hurry up and slow down.
Right.
Hurry up and slow down.
They can hurry up so I can slow down.
Exactly. I've had people say that. Can you get your book out a little faster? Well, it'll come out when it comes out. It'll be the right time.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing, it was just fascinating because you're like, why did I get caught up in this American culture of speeding up? And I think that is one of the tricky things with TCKs, third culture kids, is in order to fit into a culture, they have to figure out how that culture works. And you, in your developmental years, you're like, okay, I know how to fit in here. So you like an adaptation for you is figuring out what works in this culture.
Right.
And then you come to America, and it's not like, this is my culture, Caribbeans is my culture. It's, I adapted to that culture. So now how do I adapt to this culture? And it's that idea of like, where is home? How do I fit in? Where's my, and that's the tricky thing with TCKs is nothing is home. So I have to create here to be home. And so I hear that fascinating kind of story in yours of like, this is a counter my developmental years, but yeah, I'm doing what everybody else is doing around me. And
Exactly.
that was basically what you were taught to do, is figure out how to fit in, what's expected of you. And in that culture, what was expected of you is to slow down. But what's expected of you in this culture is speed up.
Right.
And
right.
And so just that compassion for what a wise, intuitive person you are to adapt to where you're at.
Yeah. And then to realize, oh, wow, this isn't working.
Right.
This isn't actually what I want for my life. And my body now, we do a lot of mind-body work, and the body tells us so much.
If we listen.
Yes, about our pace, about our posture. It will communicate back these big abstract truths about how we're engaging in the world. But a lot of people don't see it. And so they just continue on. And, you know, your immune system was suppressed by the stress you were under. And if you had continued that for years and years and years, it could have manifested even larger than infections. It could have been autoimmune diseases or cancers or other things, because the body tends to progressively, you know, break down further if we don't heed its message. And so you listened, and I want to honor that too, because
exactly,
it's hard to listen sometimes when we feel like you felt like that was what you needed to do to be a good mom, right? And to do the things.
Yep.
Yeah. You just want to be, everyone wants to be seen and heard and accepted. And so you find yourself just doing what everyone else is doing. And then one day you're like, wait a minute, is that even me? Is that even who I am?
Yep. And it's just, again, our stories have so much to tell about why we do what we do. And there's such intuitiveness of you to be able to reflect and like, wait, let me slow down and figure out if this is really what I want. And what you even said, like, yes, our bodies kind of quote unquote break down, but they're not breaking down. Like, what I like to say is they're alarms to try to get our attention. And just saying, hey, you're going too fast, let's slow down. Okay, you need to be sick so you can slow down. Let's just try a little bit of sickness. Then it's like, okay, you're not listening to that. Let's up it a little bit. There's a book called When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate, and it talks about that process of your body will invite you to slow down, and then it gets louder and louder and louder. And if we're able to attune to it and listen to it, it's like, it doesn't have to get to that where they're screaming at you and saying you can't do anything, but it's like, if we can listen to it when we're just frequently sick.
Yeah. And sometimes it does take time. So I don't want
Mhm.
it to seem like, oh, it was 3 months. No, this
Oh,
was
absolutely.
Right.
several, years of finally,
Years.
coming to that understanding. And
Mhm.
and we did have to make some hard decisions. We decided a few years ago to completely downsize the house we were in. So yeah, that's why right now we live in a revitalized area, a real diverse area off Main Street, and our little 1952 bungalow. And we feel like it's our little island in the city. So my husband
Mm.
is really the one that came up with that slogan. And then I'm like, that's going to be the name
That's
for my
perfect.
podcast.
Oh,
So
Oh, it's
yeah, and the
beautiful.
trees we have, they're humongous. And we found out 2 houses down, it's the second oldest house in our city. And so it was built in 1870. So these trees are probably 120 years old. There's about 6 of them. And so it's just really nice to have this little old street. It's canopied. So it's not the Caribbean, but sometimes you find yourself duplicating things
Yeah.
you loved about a slower life in a different way,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
love that.
yeah.
I love that invitation, the reality that you bring to have an island in the city. It's not like only those people that go into an island who
Vacation all year long.
can retire at 25 and just go do whatever they want. Those are the ones that have the good life. But it's like, no, we all have the opportunity to embrace the slowness of life, even if we're in a city, even
yeah,
if we're in the dog eat dog world. We have a choice to have our little island and find our
Mhm.
safe place. I love that invitation.
So what are the barriers? You said you kind of start deconstructing some of these myths in your book. What are some of those?
yeah. So I think that, and it may just be because I'm part island girl, part American. I had a dual citizenship till I was 12, so it's just one of these things. In my mind, I would say, to answer that question, I feel like we have to just stop and almost like take inventory of our identity. So if we don't know who we really are, we're just going to follow what we see in society. Um, and sometimes we just can't help it. It's just like one foot in front of the other. I've just got to do life, right? Um, but there's this idea that, especially in, like you were mentioning in the beginning, like that women have to be all, superwoman. And we can't. There's so many different layers to who we are. So you might have someone who's a type A, just go, 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 go. And you might look at them and say, oh, I wish I had that energy. But there are times that they might not have something else like the empathy or the presence, with somebody. So they might have energy. So we don't have to compare ourselves to others as much as just figuring out, who am I and what does that look like? So I have a section in my book that even breaks it down more. It's like, you're not crazy for wanting to slow down. Like, this is a real desire, a real longing somewhere deep inside of you. And so you need to pay attention to that. It might come for different people at different ages or different seasons of life. But it's really important to just say, like you were saying, what is my body trying to tell me? What am I listening to, and who am I, versus, well, I don't know any different. This is just what I have to do. We all have the ability, and then, I want people to feel empowered to stop and say, wait a minute, there's so much in life I want to do. Half the things I'm saying yes to are really people pleasing, just because I thought I had to. It was expected of me. So expectations is a big thing that I try and break down in my book. Is, who said that? Is it your, a parent or a boss or a preacher?
Jodi, thank you for sharing that. And I so relate to what you were saying, that expectations. That's been something I've worked through personally. Like, I think a slower life is a little bit easier for me than Lauren. It's like throughout our marriage, it was like, man, she's so amazing. Like, I'm lazy. Uh, I'm just, there's something wrong with me because I can't keep up with her energy. I can't keep up like with her productiveness. And then I had to get to the point of like, no, I can celebrate that in her and I can celebrate that in me, that we are different. And it was like a pressure I was putting on myself. And there was other pressures put on me through like religious worlds of like, you need to do this to be in ministry. And I was like, I don't want to be that, but okay, if I'm supposed to be a pastor, I'll be a pastor. I'm not gifted in it. I don't want to do it, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay. And I went through a couple of years of like pursuing that. I was like, this is not me. And so yes, that expectation of whether it's external, internal, just being aware of that is such a huge myth. I hear that also throughout with people I work with for the last 10 years of that can bring so much pressure to perform, to people please, and it drives us towards sickness.
And I'll just throw in, you're not the one who developed chronic fatigue. I was. So
right.
Was it the naturally slower pace that your body took that you stayed within the boundaries of, or was it the person who had no, my gosh, I don't even know how to describe what I was. It's just the Energizer Bunny that I just kept going and going and going, and was fueled by that. We talk a lot about the nervous system. So I was fueled by that sympathetic energy of my activated nervous system. And that was all I knew. And I did put that pressure on you. That pressure did come partly from me, as well as the broader culture to do more, to produce more. And yet you were not the one whose body said, no,
slow down,
stop. It was mine. And I find that absolutely not paradoxical. That was like completely with reason. Yeah. And I'm so thankful that my body's knows, even though it's caused so much suffering for me. I just did an episode on my brain retraining journey and the path that I've been on, recovering from chronic illness for years and years and years. It's just been an insane amount of suffering. And I am thankful. It's hard. I don't want to like bypass the pain and have this toxic positivity, because that's not where I'm at all. But I am thankful for my body, the wisdom of my body that told me no when I wasn't hearing no culturally, socially. I wasn't hearing it from any other place. And so my body was the only source of truth to show me the way to slow down. And so I do honor that, and I am thankful for that.
Yeah, and it's good to hold both and,
right.
Both and, yeah.
Another thought that, going back to when you just started beginning to talk, you were talking about, like, I don't know if it's because I'm part island girl or part American. I just love how our stories uniquely invite us into this truth. Like, because of you're an island girl, you can speak into a culture that is so fast paced. And because you are both and, you can take that beauty of slowing down and invite people into a life that culturally isn't valued or isn't taught. And it's just so amazing how our stories prepare us for our passions. Because you have a unique ability to understand slowing down. And I just love how our stories do that.
Mhm.
And you can bring that experience of another culture into American culture because you are a third culture kid, and speak that truth. That just stuck out to me as a cool part of your story. They uniquely
Thanks.
prepared you.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe a lot of us go through this, but I have had different times in my life where I thought, gosh, I just feel different than everybody. But we are all so much more alike than we even can imagine.
True.
Even with different life experiences or cultures. And so you're right, our story matters. And you say that on your podcast. And I talk a little bit about that in mine. I think that if we pause to just to find this authentic living that we really want, we're going to find it, and it's going to look different, and I think beauty was something that, so I've been, ever since the pandemic, it's like beauty has just been like popping out everywhere. I don't know if we're a little more attuned to seeing it now because we had to slow down. I'm not sure what that was like for you in Thailand, but for me here, so I started talking to different women, and they said, I actually don't want to go back to the pace I was living. Like, is it like, how can I pull this off? Where maybe it wasn't really even working for me in the first place.
Yes.
So,
and beauty is one of the other 5 pillars that we use for flourish therapy, because beauty just feeds that slowing down pace, that regulation. It gives us that positive, good brain chemistry that fights against our natural negative bias that our brain has for survival. And so, but when we can slow down and see beauty, like you can't see beauty when you don't slow down. You just breeze past it and you have these blinders on. So slowing down feeds beauty, and beauty feeds slowing down. Because as you slow down, you're like, wow, that's beautiful. And as you say, wow, that's beautiful, I want to see that again. And the women are saying, like, oh, I like this.
Wow. So what would you say, Jodi, is another barrier to this? It sounds so great when we hear it. I'll paint this picture sometimes for clients, and they're just like, their jaws almost open and they're just full of eagerness for this. But there's significant things that keep us from embracing this life. That's why so many of us don't, right? So what are some more of those?
Yeah, so I had this happen to me, and more people I talked to have said, yes, this is one reason I don't want to slow down is it's the fear of missing out. I'm going to miss out on something. I can't afford to do that. And the truth is, like, going back to talking about like beauty, what Luke was just saying is, no, there's more of a danger of you're going to miss so much if you don't slow down. You don't even know what you're missing. It's so amazing. And so when you start slowing down a little bit, you're like, ooh, I like this. I'm seeing more in the world, and in relationships, and the passions that you have they have room to start breathing and start saying hello. I've been here, right? So I think that's one of the myths, is that we think we're just going to miss out. And then the other myth is, well, for me, I figured out one day I didn't want to slow down, because when you slow down, your mind starts opening and saying, okay, let's talk about some things. And I was afraid, I didn't want the quiet to bring me back to some of the suffering of my husband's accident. And so if I'm busy, I don't have to think about that, right? And so those are the 2 things that, for me personally, that kept me from slowing down. And the more I talk to people, these things keep coming back up.
Yep, I see that one a lot as well. If I slow down, I'm not going to be able to get back up, or the grief, the emotions are just going to overwhelm me. And so I can't slow down and let that catch up to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have I don't know if this is a myth, it's a partial myth, but it's some reality also. I would wonder what you'd have to say to this. As you were talking, when we slow down, even though we might enjoy it, the people around us don't always, because we're not as productive. We don't carry as much weight. Somebody might have to pick up the slack that as we're putting up boundaries. And so there is like a reality of people get mad at you, people leave you, when you slow down and say, you know what, I'm not going to perform or people please. And people are like, well, I liked that I liked all your yeses and all your cooperation. I don't know if I like this new you where it has boundaries. And so what's your thoughts on that? This is not a question we prepared you for. So
Yes, no, it's okay. I'm thinking to one of my favorite quotes. It's in our living room, and it's I believe it's originated with Sophia Bush, but it says you're allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. So remember that when someone gives you a little pushback, you can think, I'm getting there, I'm not there yet, but they don't really know about my boundaries. They don't know about things I've already committed to in life.
Right.
They don't know that the pain of not being present, for me, is more than the pain of disappointing that, someone else.
Wow.
And so if we can think of those things, it's more that they just don't understand.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to be mean or anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, yeah, not necessarily. And it's also, in some respects, it's that relationship might not fit in your new world. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Because it might make them a little more uncomfortable.
Sure.
And then at the same time, so I am I'm a HSP, and I'm also Enneagram 9.
Oh,
twins.
Introvert.
I'm introverted, Enneagram 9, HSP. So
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And my highest strength is empathy. And so, that's how I am. That's who I am. And I didn't know to embrace all these things till, 5-10 years ago. And once you, like, going back to identity, once you know who you are, you can love someone for who they are.
Right.
And then just stay in your, I don't want to say the word zone, but stay where you have found sanctuary, where reflection has brought you back to who you really are.
Yes.
So it is a matter of becoming stronger as an individual, and saying, I just know what I need. It's just like I've started cutting out a lot more sugar, because for me, I feel more emotional when I have sugar, and so I think it's real. It's, I need, and when I eat healthier, I'm a nicer person to be around. So we kind of know these things about ourselves, and it does mean we have to stand up and put some boundaries up.
Yeah. It's that, like you said, that accepting your identity, believing in who you are, knowing what you need, and valuing that, because not everybody is working in that healthy space. And so realizing that not every expectation somebody puts on you is coming from their health. They might be coming from their dysfunction. But if we are able to stand firmly in our health and boundaries, then we can just, like, hey, I hear what you want from me. We don't really match up. So up to you.
Like, go in peace.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally.
Because I know, like, in ministry and at work, it's like that performance is so high. And that means sometimes, like, okay, it's time to move on to those safe people, and those safe places where you can slow down and find your island in the city or in the chaos. That means moving maybe to another island.
Yeah, and it can be so simple. So, I give the example, we all have our islands in the city. So for one person, it may be your favorite coffee shop, the little corner booth, that's your island in the city. For someone else, it's, your deck chair in your backyard. For other people, they have to go back 10, 20 years to a very special place they visited, a waterfall in another country. And our minds are amazing that can take us back there, really.
Totally.
So
totally.
yeah.
We do a lot of visualization with our clients. Well, we don't necessarily do it with them sometimes, but we help them foster using their mind, their imagination to visualize. And the brain doesn't know any different. If you're there or if you think about being there, the brain creates the same positive neurochemistry, and it's so powerful, and it can be very soothing to the body and to the mind. So I love that you added that in, because just because we're not there doesn't mean we can't
get the benefits,
access the beauty from different experiences we've had, different places. Totally.
Yeah. I think that's part of bringing this everyday island living into your life.
Wow.
Is we all have unique stories and experiences. So
yeah. I love too, Jodi, that you brought up being a highly sensitive person, being an introvert, being an Enneagram 9. If you don't know all of those terms, audience, it's no problem. But just this idea of there are certain highly sensitive people. There's actually a gene type they found associated with that 20% of the population has. And I just find that fascinating, because it's not just a sensitivity, it's a biological a way of processing the world differently. And it means that the world is experienced differently, and therefore it needs to be traveled differently. And I feel like a lot of our clients are probably the ones that tend to have a very strong bodily expression. They tend to develop chronic illnesses or pain or different things, because they're living as a highly sensitive person in a world that isn't really made for those beautiful sensitivities. And so they go on to have, constant anxiety or other things. And when they understand themselves better, they can take a different pace, and they can be in the world differently. And just you giving that invitation of like, if you feel like things don't work for you, it's not because you're broken. You're not broken. Right. There just maybe you might need something different. And I would not be saying just highly sensitive people need to slow down, because that's definitely not the case. We all do. Yeah. But the deeply empathetic, deeply feeling types really need a different way of navigating life. And it's available. It's possible.
Yeah, I think we need it maybe a little more to be our best selves.
Yeah.
But I like when you said traveling, Lauren. I like that image.
I like that too.
And I think just being open to finding out about all these things is so important. So, I was having coffee one day with KJ Ramsey. Aww. And she just looked at me and she was like, "Can I tell you something about yourself?" This is the first day we'd ever met. She said, she's like, "You're a highly sensitive person." And so because she was willing to go there, and I was in a space where, I wasn't listening to everyone, but I was listening to some people. I knew I was shifting, and so I was able to find an HSP therapist in North Carolina just for myself for 2 years, based on her just saying that and bringing it to my attention. Isn't that amazing?
So powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure that made I'm sure that was such a trajectory shift for you to be able to know something about yourself that's so impactful. Like this isn't just like a minor detail. This is a really significant part of who you are. And now that you know, you're able to love yourself and be yourself in such a different way, I'm sure.
Yes, I saw myself differently. And then so I saw the world differently, started to see others differently. And I think it gives us compassion for others and their story. It all goes back to what's our story, right? We all have a story.
Oh, we do.
And compassion for ourselves. Like, it's not there's something wrong with me that I'm affected by the world this way, or that I can't handle these things. It's like, this is who I am, and that's okay. And which is just another, which is we're just going to hit all 5 pillars, I think, today, because that's another pillar for therapy. It's compassion. So you are just nailing them.
And acceptance.
Jodi.
You just said acceptance of who you are. That's another pillar.
That's true.
Yeah. It's amazing how healing.
The 5th one is if
you're in this work long enough, you just find, wow, there's so much affirmation of these truths that we discover along the way in different people's work, maybe said a different way or, presented differently. But we, like you said, we're way more similar than we are different. And one of our favorite attachment therapists, she's gone on to pass, but she worked with adopted kids for years, Karen Purvis. She would say about children and adults that we're all made of the same thing, and we all need the same thing. We're all made up of the same thing. Like just bringing it all down to the level playing field of our humanity and our needs as humans, and totally see the truth there that yes, we need different things, but we also need connection, slowing down, meaning, purpose. Like we need to be who we fully are. It's such a deep human need. And we can't do that often because we're living at this breakneck speed. And it almost, I don't want to use it doesn't erase who we are, but it like blurs the image. Maybe if you think of someone running really fast and you can't even see them, it's just so blurry. Maybe that would work.
Yeah.
Well, I think slowing down, you can't accept, like, if going back to what I felt compared to you, Lauren, like I had a hard time slowing down because I couldn't accept that who I was okay.
Right.
And so accepting that who I was gave me an opportunity and an invitation to slow down. And so I think having that insight of like being an Enneagram 9 of like, oh, I have they have the lowest energy of anybody, all personalities. Oh, there's not something wrong with me. This is just who I am. I just go a little slower and I'm happier with a little less. And so to be able to accept that this is who I am. I don't have to be Lauren, the Enneagram 8, who is high energy and passionate and the go-getter. But if I couldn't accept, if I wasn't curious about who I was and then accept those things, slowing down just doesn't happen. So I just love that that insight you had, Jodi, of that invitation of, hey, you're HSP. You were curious, you're compassionate with yourself. You're like, okay, this sits with me. I accept it. So what does that mean for me? What's best for me? Okay, slowing down. And if we try to be somebody else and can't accept that that's an okay thing to be, then we're not gonna slow down. We're gonna keep that breakneck speed, and it's gonna be counterproductive. So I just love what you just said, Jodi, and just hitting home.
Thanks. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Jodi, this has been such a rich conversation, and I just
Yes.
knew it's going to be really juicy and lovely. What is there anything you would like to leave our audience of the why this is worth it for them in their journey, or anything you would like to say?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Lauren. I think when we savor life and when we look for acceptance and we give acceptance, I think we don't know what we're missing. That's why I just want to tell people, like, slow down, because your passions are going to start coming out. You're going to actually see people in front of you. Like, when you slow down, you're going to see, try making eye contact with people and really listening, and your world is going to come alive. So it's not that you're, I'm begging you to slow down. It's more like I'm inviting you to more than you ever knew was possible. Just a richness of life that I don't want people to miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
I hear you inviting people to like a high definition life, like, like experiencing life in HD of like eye contact, connection, just the depth of just being present with people. I love that invitation that you just shared. I won't say that it's our fifth pillar of embodiment. I won't say that at all.
Oh.
This wasn't planned at all, but it just is how it is. Okay, so we will wrap up. You can find Jodi at her site, jodigrubbs.com, Grubbs with 2 B's, Jodi with an I, and also on Instagram. And we will link that in the description if you want to follow her, so you can be aware of when her book comes out, which it sounds like, is it like a mix of like not self-help, but is it memoir / is there some story in it too? I'm hearing that you're doing.
Yes, it'll be about 10% memoir, 10% spiritual formation, lots of slow living, soul care, deep community, some island stories, narrative, self-help.
Narrative self-help. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, what a gift to the world.
I love that.
Thank you for being faithful to do that work. A tedious, so just requires every cell of your person to put into that, and it is such a gift, and we're thankful for it, even before it arrives.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for asking me to be part of this and part of what you both are doing.
Well, it's our pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Jodi, and thank you for listening to this episode. Go ahead and share it if you feel like this would really resonate with someone, and we will see you on next time for our next episode.